Welcome, dear brave listener. You're tuning in to Careful TV, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in during the day or late at night, thank you for choosing to spend a part of your time with me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. I never wanted to end up working overnight shifts at a convenience store, but life doesn't really give you a neat set of options when bills start piling up and you're barely out of high school. The 7-Eleven off US 24 in Colorado Springs was hiring, and they didn't care that I had no real experience. The hours weren't glamorous, midnight until sunrise most nights, but I told myself it was easy work. Stock shelves, ring up a handful of customers, keep the place from looking like a mess. Nights were quiet, mostly truckers grabbing coffee or half-asleep locals stopping in for cigarettes. The pay wasn't great, but the steady rhythm of the job gave me this strange sense of control. For a while, I even liked the routine. It was predictable in a way my life rarely was. My name's Chris, and the night that changed everything for me started out no different than any other. I clocked in around 11:45 p.m., unlocked the register, and wiped down the counter like I always did. The lot outside was empty, save for one sedan fueling up before pulling away. The buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead filled the store, a constant reminder of how alone I was. It's a sound you stop noticing after a while, but when you're anxious, it feels louder than anything else in the room. Mondays were usually the slowest. The whole town seemed to shut down early, and by the time midnight rolled around, I was usually left with nothing but the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional car passing in the distance. I leaned against the counter, absent-mindedly flipping through the scratch paper we used for notes, and realized I'd forgotten to lock the doors. That was something we were supposed to do after midnight, once the palm switched to card only. I sighed, grabbed the keys from under the counter, and started toward the entrance. That's when I saw him. At first glance, he looked like just another late-night customer walking up from the pumps. His pace wasn't hurried, his posture wasn't aggressive. But when my eyes adjusted, when I really took him in, my stomach dropped. He was massive, easily over 7 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to stretch his too small clothes until the seams strained. His long arms hung low, swinging slightly with each slow, deliberate step. And even from across the lot, I could see his eyes locked directly on me through the glass, unblinking. I hurried to flip the sign to closed and twisted the lock. My pulse ticked faster, but he didn't stop. He walked right up the door, so close the glass fogged faintly with his breath. His lips moved, mumbling something I couldn't hear. Then came a knock. Tap, tap, tap. Not hard, not threatening, just deliberate. I shook my head and pointed at the sign. We're closed, I mouthed, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. He tilted his head like he was confused, his expression twisting slightly, and then knocked again, faster this time. Tap, 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 tap. Each knock made my chest tighten a little more, like the sound itself was winding me tighter. I backed away from the door, pretending to busy myself behind the counter, pretending like I wasn't rattled. After a few seconds, it went quiet. I told myself he gotten bored, that he'd wander off into the night like plenty of strange customers before him. It was easier to believe that than the alternative. But when I glanced back toward the door, I froze. He was crouched now, his massive frame bent low, his eyes level with mine through the glass. And that grin, wide, stretched in a way that looked unnatural, spread across his face. Open up, he whispered. The words were muffled by the glass, but still clear enough to understand. I want a Slurpee. I forced a shaky smile, my throat tight. Sorry, man. Closed. His grin faltered for the first time. His voice dropped deeper, more guttural. Slurpee. I want a Slurpee. I didn't answer. My pulse pounded in my ears, so loud it felt like it was echoing through the store. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, he straightened up. He turned slowly and walked back toward the pumps, vanishing into the shadows beyond the glow of the lights. Relief washed over me, but it was fragile, thin. I rushed through mopping the floor, every movement jerky, my eyes darting to the windows with every sound. I drained the bucket too quickly, shoved it back into the closet, and ducked into the back room just to give myself a moment. I sat there, head in my hands, trying to slow my breathing. When I came back, everything in me went cold. Through the glass, under the harsh yellow glow of the pump lights, I saw him again. But this time he wasn't alone. A silver sedan sat parked at pump 4. In the driver's seat was a man slumped over, unmoving. The giant stood beside the car, and this time he wasn't pretending. He was staring directly at me. Our eyes met, and he started walking toward the door again. "Pump 4, he said when he reached the glass, his deep voice carrying through the quiet. My throat was dry. "How are you paying?" I called out, though I already knew what he'd say. His grin returned, slow and deliberate, stretching his face into something that felt wrong. "Cash." My stomach dropped. Store policy was clear. If someone wanted to pay cash at the register, I had to let them in. It didn't matter what time of night it was. It didn't matter how uncomfortable I felt. My hand hovered over the lock, every nerve in my body screaming not to open it. But I did. I don't know if it was fear of breaking the rules, or just fear of what he'd do if I didn't. The moment the door clicked, I stepped back, putting as much distance between us as possible. He ducked through the doorway, his frame nearly filling it, the door frame almost brushing his shoulders. Each step he took seemed too heavy, the tiles under his boots groaning softly. I forced myself to speak. "How much for pump 4? He didn't answer. He took another step, then another, until the counter between us felt like nothing at all. Then his massive hand shot out and grabbed my collar. My feet lifted clean off the ground as he hauled me over the counter like I weighed nothing. My chest seized with panic, my hands clawing at his arm. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot against my cheek, his eyes wild. "Slurpee," he bellowed, shaking me like a rag doll. "I want a Slurpee." I thrashed, kicking wildly, my body fueled by pure panic. My foot connected with his chest hard enough to make him stumble. His grip loosened just long enough for me to drop. I hit the floor hard, pain shooting through my elbow, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet, bolted for the back hallway, and ran until I reached the single-stall bathroom. I slammed the door, twisted the lock, and pressed my back against it. My chest heaved, every breath shaky. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped my phone as I pulled it from my pocket. Somehow, I managed to dial 911. "There's a man," I gasped into the phone. "Huge guy. Just attacked me at the 7-Eleven on US 24. Please, he's still here." Thought. The sound made me flinch. Something heavy hit the bathroom door. Then again. Thought. Slow, deliberate. I pressed my back harder against the wall, as if that would somehow help. My free hand covered my mouth to quiet my breathing. Every thud reverberated through me, through the floor, through the thin door that was the only thing between us. Then, silence. Minutes stretched like hours. I sat there frozen, my phone pressed to my ear, the dispatcher's voice faint but steady. "Stay on the line. Officers are on their way." The distant wail of sirens broke through at last, growing louder until red and blue lights flashed through the frosted bathroom window. Relief flooded me, so suddenly I almost collapsed. When I finally cracked the door open, the giant was gone, but the silver sedan was still there. The police swarmed the lot. They found the driver slumped in his seat, unconscious. His window had been smashed in, shards of glass glittering across the pavement. The bruising on his neck told the rest of the story. He'd been strangled. Later, we reviewed the security footage. The giant had approached the car the moment it pulled into the lot. He tore open the window with his bare hands, dragged the man out, and stood there beside the vehicle like he was waiting for me to notice him. He must have been there for minutes, just watching. But here's the part one can't shake. Despite his size, despite his unmistakable appearance, the police never found him. No name, no record, no one matching his description anywhere in the area. It was like he disappeared into thin air. I quit the next morning, walked out without looking back. I haven't set foot in a 7-Eleven since. And sometimes, late at night, when a house is quiet and every sound feels sharper than it should, I wonder if he's still out there, knocking on some other door, waiting for someone else to open it. I used to like the quiet of night shifts. There was something oddly peaceful about standing behind the counter when the city outside had gone still, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, the hum of the coolers filling the silence. I'd learned to tune in to those background noises almost like they were a soundtrack to my nights. The buzz, the hum, the occasional distant car passing on Lake Street. Most nights were predictable, almost monotonous. Drunks stumbling in for snacks, delivery drivers topping off on gas before another long haul, the occasional kid who thought he was clever trying to sneak a beer into a pile of chips. It wasn't glamorous, but it wasn't terrifying either. That's what I told myself every evening as I clocked in at the 7-Eleven off Lake Street in Minneapolis, pulling on a red and green vest, tucking my hair behind my ears, and preparing to face 12 hours of fluorescent stillness. My name's Elena, and I didn't realize how quickly the line between harmless and dangerous could disappear until one night when I found myself staring at a man who didn't see me as a cashier or even a person, just someone to follow. That October had been colder than usual, the kind of fall where the wind slipped right through your jacket and you saw your breath in pale clouds as soon as you stepped outside. The city always had an edge to it in the colder months. Streets quieter, people keeping their heads down, moving quickly from their cars to buildings. It was halfway through my 10-hour shift, and my body was already running on caffeine and habit. I leaned on the counter, tapping my pen against a pad of scratch paper, when he walked in. He didn't stand out at first glance. Average height, maybe a little taller than me. Brown hair that was scruffy but not dirty, just unkempt like he'd stopped caring about how he looked. His jacket hung loose, too big for his frame, the sleeves covering part of his hands. He moved casually, maybe even a little too casually, and for a second I told myself he was just another late-night customer. But there was something about his eyes, restless, never settling. They darted from the shelves to the security cameras to me, like he was scanning, calculating. He grabbed the Coke and a pack of gum, then walked up to the counter. "You're real pretty," he said. His voice was smooth in the way that made my skin crawl. Too practiced, too deliberate, like he'd used that line 1,000 times before and knew how to make it sound almost normal. I forced a polite smile, the kind I gave the customers I just wanted to get rid of quickly. "That'll be $3.89. Instead of pulling out his wallet right away, he leaned forward on the counter, resting his elbows like we were two friends talking instead of a customer and cashier. His eyes didn't leave mine. "What time you get off?" My stomach nodded instantly. Plenty of people had asked before, drunk men trying their luck or just being obnoxious, but his tone was different. It wasn't lighthearted. It wasn't a joke. It was a statement wrapped in a question, like he'd already decided the answer. "Midnight." I lied quickly. "My boyfriend's picking me up." That wasn't true. I didn't have a boyfriend. I usually just walked to the bus stop at the corner, or, if it was too late, called an Uber. But lying felt safer than leaving him with the truth. His smile spread slowly, unsettling. "Good. I'll wait outside. Maybe we can all get a drink." I pretended to laugh, my throat tight, bagged his items as quickly as I could, and slid them across the counter. He pulled a crumpled $5 from his pocket and handed it to me. His fingers brushed against mine, lingering just a second too long. "Thanks," I muttered, keeping my eyes down. I shoved the change back into his hand and watched him leave, the bell over the door chiming behind him. The rest of my shift dragged in a way that made every minute feel like an hour. My eyes kept flicking to the windows, to the glow of the pumps outside, scanning for movement. Every shadow looked like him. Every sound made me flinch. When midnight came, I grabbed my bag, braced myself, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, colder than before. 20 feet away, under a flickering streetlight, I heard a car door creak open. My heart sank. It was him. He climbed out slowly, like he'd been waiting the entire time. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, like he wanted me to know he wasn't going anywhere. I spun on my heel and rushed back inside, nearly colliding with David, my co-worker, who had just come out from the back room after stocking shelves. "What's wrong?" he asked, frowning at the look on my face. "Just say I'm on break," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best effort to keep it steady. A second later, the bell above the door chimed. The man strolled in, moving slowly, his eyes sweeping across the store until they landed on me. David said quickly, catching on. "She's on break. Should be out in a minute." The man didn't respond. He just stood there, his gaze steady, silent for a few seconds before finally turning and walking back out. My chest heaved. I gripped the counter so tightly my knuckles hurt. For a long moment, I just stood there, frozen, barely able to breathe. That was the first night he waited, but it wasn't a last. Over the next 2 weeks, he kept showing up. Sometimes he'd park his car near the edge of the lot and just sit there, watching. Other times he'd walk inside and buy something small, chips, candy, soda, but his eyes never left me. It didn't matter what he picked up. The purchase was just an excuse. He wanted me to know he was there. He wanted me to see him. The routine wore me down quickly. Leaving work turned into an ordeal. My chest would tighten as the end of my shift approached, my eyes glued to the clock, my mind racing through exit strategies. I started calling Ubers every night, even though it ate through half my paycheck. It felt like the only way to get home safely. One driver in particular, Marcus, started to notice. He picked me up a few nights in a row, then began waiting for me outside the store before I even requested a ride. He never asked questions, just greeted me with a quiet nod, unlocked the back door, and drove me home. One night, as we turned on a Hennepin Avenue, I glanced in the side mirror. Headlights followed us closely, matching every turn. My pulse spiked. "That guy's following us," I whispered, my throat tight. Marcus glanced in the mirror, his face calm. He didn't panic, didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just started looping through side streets, weaving left and right. For 10 minutes, the car stuck with us, every turn, every detour. Then finally, after Marcus made a sudden right onto a smaller residential road, the car peeled off. I exhaled so hard I felt lightheaded, tears stinging my eyes. "Thank you," I said, fumbling for cash and pressing it into his hand, even though he tried to wave it away. "Listen," he said gently, his voice steady. "You need to go to the police. This isn't normal." I knew he was right. The next day, I forced myself to walk into the station. My palms were slick with sweat as I sat across from an officer and explained everything. How the man kept showing up, how he followed me, how he sat outside watching me. I detailed every night, every glance, every word he'd spoken. When I finished, the officer leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "Has he threatened you?" "Not directly." "Has he touched you?" "No, but then we can't do much," he said flatly. "If he hurts you, call us right away." I want to scream. That was the whole point of coming in now, so it wouldn't get that far. But all I got was a stack of forms and the suggestion to file for a restraining order if things escalated further. And escalate they did. One night, close to 3 a.m., the store was empty. No customers, no deliveries, just me and the buzz of the lights overhead. The bell chimed, and he walked in. He didn't grab anything from his shelves. He didn't look around. He just stood near the counter, his gaze fixed on me, heavy and suffocating. I tried to keep my hand steady as I picked up my phone, scrolling through nothing just to avoid looking at him. But his presence filled the space like a shadow that clung to every corner. Then he leaned closer. His voice was low, sharp, out of like being lied to. I slid down my spine. My throat closed. Every instinct told me to run, but my body wouldn't move. I didn't respond. Instead, I reached for the store phone, dialed 911 right in front of him. He laughed, a low, unsettling chuckle. Then he turned and walked out, the bell over the door chiming behind him. It took months of paperwork, sleepless nights, repeated visits to courtrooms where I sat across from him, trying not to meet his eyes as lawyers argued over whether my fear was valid. Eventually, a judge signed the restraining order, and just like that, he vanished. No more car idling outside. No more shadow in the corner of my vision. No more waiting under the streetlights. The first night he was gone, I stepped outside cautiously, scanning every corner of the lot. Empty. The air felt lighter, safer. For the first time in months, I let myself cry. My shoulders shook as all the tension that had built up finally broke. Marcus picked me up that night. We drove around the city in silence. I pressed my forehead to the cool window, watching the blur of lights pass by, tears drying on my face. If I learn anything from that time, it's this: don't wait for proof. Don't minimize the feeling in your gut that something is wrong. Don't be polite to people who set off alarms inside you. Because sometimes, when you feel like you're being hunted, you are. And you don't always get a second chance to be believed. I used to think of late-night trips to the corner store as nothing more than small interruptions in an otherwise ordinary life. Sometimes it was because the apartment felt too cramped, or the air conditioner rattled so loudly it couldn't keep up with the sticky heat that clung to our building. Other times it was just an excuse to step outside and stretch my legs. That Friday night felt no different. The streets in our park, Columbus, always had this hazy glow after sunset, with neon signs reflecting off wet pavement from the earlier rain. I told myself it would be quick, a 10-minute walk to the 7-Eleven on the other side of Broad Street, grab a couple of slushies, and be back before the rerun of the game I was halfway through watching. My daughter was already asleep, but my son had begged me to go. He wanted something cold, something sweet, and honestly, I didn't mind the excuse to get out for a bit. My name's Marcus, and even now, years later, I can't cross that intersection without feeling my chest tighten. It's strange how a place that used to mean nothing can hold so much weight after one night. The walk down Broad wasn't anything unusual at first. The sidewalks were damp, the air heavy with humidity. A few bars had people lingering out front, laughing too loud, smoking in clusters. A city bus rolled past and splashed water across the gutter. My son Devin skipped along beside me, a little too energetic for how late it was. I reminded him to stay close. I always did, even though we'd made this walk dozens of times without issue. When we reached the park, I noticed how empty it felt. The basketball court lights were still buzzing, but no one was playing. Just the sound of the net swaying in the breeze. I gripped Devin's shoulder lightly, steering him closer to me as we crossed the stretch of sidewalk that cut past the trees. That's when I saw them, two figures stepping out from the shadows near the benches. At first, I thought they were just another couple heading home from a bar. The man wore a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, his shoes too shiny for this part of town. The woman had on a short navy dress, her hair pulled back like she'd just come from dinner. Both looked out of place against the cracked pavement and graffiti tag benches. I figured they'd pass by us without a word, but the way they moved, straight toward us, their eyes locked on me, made something in my chest stir uncomfortably. The man spoke first. His voice was calm, flat. "Hand me your wallet." I blinked at him, thrown off by how casually he said it. No threats, no anger, just like he was asking for directions. "You serious?" I asked, a nervous laugh catching in my throat. He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a folding knife from his pocket and flicked the blade open. It gleamed under the orange glow of the streetlight. My stomach dropped. Instinctively, I shifted in front of Devin, my arm stretching back to keep him behind me. "Look, man," I said, trying to sound steady even though my pulse was hammering. "I don't have much on me. You don't gotta do this." That's when the woman moved. She'd been silent until now, but quick as a whip she reached past me and grabbed Devin's wrist. His face twisted in shock, his small body jerking against her grip. "Let him go," I yelled, stepping forward, but the man lunged. A sharp, cold sting pierced my side. I stumbled, my legs wobbling beneath me. For a second, the world tilted. I realized he had stabbed me, though I barely registered the pain, just the rawness of it, like my body wasn't mine anymore. Devin shouted, his voice high and panicked. He kicked at the woman, twisting in her grasp. Ava's scream, my daughter, wasn't there. She was safe at home, but I swear I heard her voice echoing in my head anyway. And something inside me snapped. Fear burned off into something rawer, heavier. Rage. I don't remember deciding to swing. My fist connected with the woman's jaw before I even realized I'd moved. She crumpled to the pavement with a startled cry, clutching her face like she was the one being attacked. The man pulled his knife free, the motion jerking my body forward. My knees nearly gave out. I braced for another strike. But then, hey, what the hell's going on? Two joggers rounded the corner, their sneakers slapping against the wet pavement. Their voices cut through the fog in my head. The man's eyes darted between me and them, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word. He just turned and ran into the dark. The woman stayed down, moaning softly, her hands still pressed to her face. Maybe she thought if she looked helpless enough, she wouldn't get blamed. My legs buckled, and I collapsed hard onto the sidewalk. For a moment, the only sound was Devin crying and the woman's strained wailing. The police arrived minutes later, though it felt like hours. The joggers had called them, but instead of rushing to my side, they treated me like a threat. Even with Devin insisting over and over that the strangers had tried to grab him, the officers questioned me like I'd lost control and attacked some innocent couple. The joggers, well-meaning but distant, had only seen me strike the woman. It wasn't until Devin's story aligned with the bruises on her wrist and the knife still lying near the curb that things started to shift. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to see what really happened. Later, I learned the woman wasn't just some unlucky stranger. She was the daughter of a wealthy family from the suburbs, spiraled into drugs, wrapped up with people who used their privilege like a shield. She, and her boyfriend, if that's what he was, had been picking random people, sometimes for cash, sometimes for darker reasons no one wanted to say out loud. This time, it was about more than money. They had tried to take Devin. The man vanished into the city, never caught. The woman was arrested, convicted of attempted kidnapping, though her family pushed hard to paint me as the aggressor. Said I'd assaulted their daughter, unprovoked. The charges against me were thrown out, but the fact that they tried, that still eats at me. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I collapsed long, stitches along my side, tubes draining blood I didn't want to think about. The pain was sharp, constant, but all I cared about was Devin sitting in the chair beside me, safe. Nights are harder now. I replay the what-ifs until my mind is raw. What if I hadn't swung fast enough? What if the joggers hadn't come by? What if the knife had landed an inch higher? I don't make late-night store runs anymore. When the craving for a slushie hits, I drive in daylight or order groceries online. And every time I pass that crosswalk on Broad, I grip the wheel a little tighter, wondering how close I came to losing everything in the span of a single, ordinary walk.